Hello everyone, I'm Joel, your host for Talking Trends, where we explore real estate trends as well as other luxury lifestyle trends here in the greater Sarasota area. Today we're really excited. We're on location at 8250 Sanderling Road, our new listing on Siesta Key. And it's great because we get to tell the story about this property. We're here with the architect for the property, Guy Peterson. Guy, welcome. It's great to have you on this segment.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you inviting me.
And I'm a huge fan, of course, of your work. I've been very fortunate over the years to get to work with buyers and sellers on a number of properties that you design. So it's real positive for me to be here and be a listing agent for this property. So let's dive in a little bit about it. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, obviously I'm an architect. I'm from Sarasota. I've been here my entire life other than school and a 10-year stint in Tallahassee, but it's been home for me. And I was actually born in Cheyenne, Wyoming, but my father was a doctor and he got out of the Air Force. I was born in an Air Force base there, and they moved to Sarasota right after that. So I was like 6 months old when I moved here. So I call myself a native, but it's
as close as we get, I think.
It's about as close as you can get to being a native. But I was fortunate to be surrounded by amazing architecture as a young boy growing up. My parents were great friends with many of the architects of the Sarasota School. We belonged to the Field Club and Tim Siebert. I played tennis with Jack West, and I went to school with Frank Smith's daughters. I went to school with Victor Lundy's daughter. I went to school with Tim Siebert's daughter, and I went to school and knew all Jack's three daughters. They all had daughters. Nobody had a son. But anyway, I grew up. They were all friends of mine, and my parents would tell me when I was a young boy that, these guys are doing some really interesting architecture, and I was going to be a doctor, so I didn't really pay much attention to it. But I've always said I wasn't part of the Sarasota School of Architecture, but it was part of me growing up.
Fantastic, and I think that's what we love, right? You are local, You grew up here, you know what Sarasota is all about, but at the same time, you're recognized nationally, internationally for many of the projects you've done, which I think is, again, it's so nice to have a native
thank you.
In that context. And one other thing I want to point out, Guy, obviously it's Guy Peterson, FAIA.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thank you. The F stands for fellow, and I was elected in the College of Fellows actually 20 years ago in 2003. And it's a national recognition, not a local chapter or a state chapter. It's the entire United States. And I got it for my design work and the contributions to the profession through that. So it's a very high honor, an honor I'm proud to have. And there's only 3% of the architects in America are elected in the College of Fellows. So it's a nice memory for me or a reminder to me, let's put it that way, that the work that I have done has made some difference.
And fantastic, and congratulations.
Well, thank you.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to dive in, talk a little bit about this property. So obviously it was a custom design for your client at that time. Was there some inspiration or some basis for the start of this project?
There's no one thing I put my finger on that inspired me. I think you look back at your work, and sometimes this house in particular, I'll look back at I have the original drawings on my wall in my studio in North Carolina right now, and I actually drew I still hand draw. I believe in handmade architecture. So all my design work for all 43 years of my career, I've presented every design. I've drawn it by hand.
Wow. And
designed it by hand and presented it with my pencil presentation drawings. And I think that it's just, I'm a modernist, and there's a difference between being a modernist and everybody says, oh, you're a contemporary architect, yeah. Guy Peterson. Yep. Well, we're all contemporary architects because we're of our time.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson was a contemporary architect when he was doing architecture. A modernist is based on the principles of modernism that really came out of the Bauhaus in the 20s. Walter Gropius and his team of amazing people there. And those principles are something that I was taught in graduate school, and I adopted those as something a path that I wanted to follow, and being honest about doing timeless architecture. And so Le Corbusier, Luis Barragan from Mexico, obviously Paul Rudolph, Victor Lundy, a lot of people influenced my life, and I think that Gene Leedy with his work with concrete, So I think if there's an inspiration, it's probably just a lifetime of probably absorbing different things that I like. This particular house, obviously working in the Sanderling Club, this was the first house I did in the Sanderling Club, and knowing Rudolph's legacy here, it was important to me because there weren't a lot of modern homes in here. I wanted to do something that kind of carried that forward with the residents. I did have the fortune in the 80s in my firm, we were hired to renovate the clubhouse at the Sanderling Cabanas. We actually elevated the entire building over a foot and refurbished it. And so I think there's some argument whether Rudolph actually designed the clubhouse or not, but he did do the cabanas, but it was definitely in his style. And so I think that inspired me to do something that was going to be different here. But essentially the building is just, it's a large concrete pavilion, glass concrete pavilion. It's very honest. I work on a 12-foot grid, both horizontally and vertically, because that can go into so many different dimensions. But the columns are basically 18 feet apart. And so you lay out this beautiful grid of columns with concrete floors, concrete roof. I always wanted to explore architectural concrete that's not covered. So the beauty of the material. Concrete's beautiful because of its imperfections, in my opinion. And so then I enclosed this whole pavilion in glass. And then the idea of interjecting these volumetric elements, these cubes I call them, it becomes like this study in mass void, where the cubes are where the functions take place in the house. You know, the living, the dining, all the different things take place in these volumetric elements that are engaged in this glass concrete pavilion. And each cube has a different function. The original client, he wanted color, so we actually introduced some color to these cubes, which that was a request of the client, not something that I thought of and said, why don't we do this? But we did find a shell on the beach, and we used those 4 colors because it was an indigenous regional color. And to me, white is a very important color in architecture. I used to work for Jim Holliday. Jim was an architect here in Sarasota, worked for the Zimmerman brothers, so he came out of the Sarasota school. He's basically the same age as my father. But Jim taught me a lot about architecture, but we'd go out to a site when he had a new house, and he'd go to a pine tree and pull the bark off, and he'd hold up the piece of bark and he says to the client, this is the color palette for your house. It's got browns and blacks and silvers and grays. It's beautiful colors. So his concept was he wanted to kind of emulate nature and try and blend in with nature. I didn't want to try, I can't be nature. Frank Lloyd Wright used to call nature with a capital N because it's so important. But I think if you do something in white, it reflects nature. All of a sudden the green looks greener, the skies look bluer.
And I love it, I think, too, because you are in an amazing site, right? You're on the beach. You have views from every room. You actually want to balance kind of the architecture with the site, which is just stunning. So I think that's what's interesting. And I think you reference the cubes, and I think some people would feel that's cold, but I think the beauty of this home is all the spaces are super comfortable. So they're all designed for a certain purpose, and they're comfortable. So if it's just 1 or 2 people here, that room is super comfortable. If you have a big group of people, it works.
Well, I think architecture is sculpture with useful function. And this is a big piece of sculpture. And I think one of the things that's so powerful and successful in the house, in my opinion, is the cubes aren't just, you see them from the outside, but when you're in the building, you actually walk from one volume to another through these bridges. So you always know you're going from one volumetric element to another volumetric element. And I think they're just as apparent internally as they are externally.
Yeah, love it. Love it. So you've done many projects over the years. What's your feeling in this one? Is this one of your favorites?
I would say this ranks among probably one of the most important projects in my career. It's definitely one of my seminal works. If I had to pick top 5, and I say that because I did something I've never done before, and I've never done it again. But there's elements of this house that I have started exploring, like probably people know me from my work because I use sometimes a lot of slits, or I use a lot of perforations with the glass block. Well, I brought some of those into this project because that's something I was exploring at the time.
Right.
But I never did it in a vocabulary and a structure quite like this. I designed this in March of 1996. That's when I did the drawing for it and presented it to my client. And here we are almost 25 years later. And to me, it's still as new as it was then. I think it's timeless, and that's always the goal, is to do something that's not, I don't ever design anything based on current fashion or some fad or what's happening now, because then you date your architecture. I want something that's gonna look as fresh and as new as when the day is built. And I think, I honestly think in 25 more years, I think this house will still look like it could have been built anytime.
Absolutely. I love that. And that brings up a good point. So in 2015, you worked with the current owners of the property to do pretty much a massive refurbishment, remodel. Was there a goal or something they set out to accomplish in that renovation?
Well, I think it was really a combination of a lot of people. I was fortunate to be involved in the project. I think the biggest, well, obviously, the idea of getting back to a more simple palette of colors was important to me. The artwork, that was a driving need or want or part of the scope of work, that they wanted to make this into more like a museum and a display space for art. And I think we have the walls to do that. And the team that we worked with Michael Walker, the builder, and Richard Gary, I had heard of Richard Gary before, but I had never met him. And working with Dick on this house was just an amazing opportunity. We bonded, we became friends, we're still friends today. I'm doing a beautiful new modern house at the very north end of the public beach, right at the very end. It's been under construction for quite some time. But Dick is on that project, and he's working at the same level he did with here in terms of total design, with designing the furniture, designing the rugs. So it's Dick and Michael and and Dick was so respectful of the architecture. He wouldn't do anything without calling me.
That's all right, yeah.
He would say, "Guy, what do you think about this?" Because he said, I don't want to screw this house up. That's what he kept telling me. So, and he didn't. He just, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and you can tell, right? I think everything is perfectly curated.
It is
throughout the house. It's obviously the artwork, the furniture, the design. It just is so cohesive.
Lighting, everything is just landscaping. Yeah, I mean, John Wheeler came in and did his magic here, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And
yep, from the moment you kind of enter the property, it's just awe-inspiring almost.
And I'm a minimalist, and I believe in not additive architecture, like you design a space and say, now what can I add to it to make it more interesting? I design a space and now what can I take away that I don't need? So you end up with pure space and light and things like that. So the art now really stands out because the rest of the building is kind of a backdrop.
Right.
And that's intentional.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it, right? It takes on its own energy.
It does.
Yeah. So obviously we're on the Gulf of Mexico. It's a big site here. Obviously the Gulf is right there. Obviously there's some special considerations when you're designing on a site like this. Obviously there's pilings, which are kind of fun, right? They actually became part of the...
Well, they're hidden. They're about 40 feet deep, but there's a lot of, each of these columns has a pile cap and probably 3 or 4 piles underneath it. So this building is not going anywhere. But that, obviously we use concrete piles. They build them on wooden piles, but these are all precast concrete driven piles. But then everything that came out of the ground on those pile caps is the artificial concrete that supports the structure. And in terms of building on the Gulf of Mexico or any coastal environment, it's a very corrosive environment. And you have to pick materials that are going to withstand the environment. And we used aluminum powder-coated handrails, no steel out there at all. All the window frames are anodized aluminum, which is the best. They don't last forever, and they do get pitted after a while, but in a salt environment, it still remains the best you can do. And because we're on the coast, we have to elevate the house to, I think we're 18 feet to the bottom of the lowest horizontal structural member. I think the entry sequence here is really quite special with the big 3-story foyer, and you see the bridges going by and you see the different volumes you're going to be experiencing. So to me, using those codes gives me an opportunity to do something that's even more dramatic.
Exactly.
But it doesn't look like I just jacked it up and put it in the air. So, but we have to use certain materials down below, like I mentioned, that are flood-proof, and we can't have any living functions down below.
Right.
We have a garage, and we have the foyer, and then access up. And entering the house down below, there's 2 stairs. There's 2 things: was the columns in the middle of the sidewalk and having 2 stairs. Why isn't that redundant? So there's a real purpose for that. Is the stair that you come in from the foyer, I always call the public stair.
Right.
Because that's where guests come in, they arrive up here, they're in the living room, they're dining room, they're in the public spaces. And then we have the family stair. You come in from the garage, you come up the family stair, you're in the kitchen, the family room, and closer to the bedrooms. So, and it worked out really beautiful. So 2 of the voids between this become the vertical circulation in the house. And to me, architecture is not just about what you see, but it's about what you experience.
Yeah.
And so I feel as an architect, you're kind of the conductor of a journey.
Right.
I mean, I always start my design not as you approach the site, the experience of arriving at the site. What are you going to see? I mean, I put this white wall out here where the guest park because I didn't want to give the view away.
Right.
I want there to be a surprise. I want there to be an expectation of something that's going to be better. You don't want to give the aha moment away as you first get there, because then maybe it doesn't get any better than that. So as you come into the building and you come up the stair, you start to unfold the view and you get up to the top, and then many different places you get the big view. But internally you're looking down the hallways and little windows that capture, like the aquarium window in the kitchen.
Right.
I think it's a really neat little horizontal. All you see is green.
Exactly.
You don't see anything else. So, but to me, it's about movement and experiences and stuff like that. So, but there's a lot of unique things about it that I'm glad that we got built.
I love it. I love listening to some of this because I know my showings are going to be so much better now as I walk through, because it's about the design and the utility elements of it, and what the thought process that went through it. I think it's the buyer of this home will love that. That's what they'll appreciate, and really be, what does it for them, essentially.
Right.
So obviously incredible information. Love all these details. Anything else we need to know about this house?
I think the only other thing I'd mention is that there's these 4 volumetric elements. If you look at it from the back of the house, the only one that's symmetrical is the center one. You look to the left, you look to the right, they're same size, but they're articulated differently. I tried fight symmetry. If you look at the front of the house, we get a long horizontal one, and then behind it you can start to see them. But the center cube is always what I call the shared cube. It's got the dining room upstairs. It has like a library and opens to the roof garden. And that is the only cube that dissolves in the house. It's solid at the front, but as you get toward the back or the street side, that one kind of dissolves into the house and opens out to the roof garden, which is really for the owners. But the guest room can come out and go through the library space, which is now one of the owner's offices, and then master bedroom. And creating a roof garden, I thought, was really an important part of this project, because we've got everybody, the golf is, you just can't match that. But we also have Heron Lagoon, and we had created a beautiful little path through the mangroves. You look down a mile, it's a mile long, Heron Lagoon, and I wanted to have an experience so you can watch the sunrise, not just the sunset, and go out. And if you notice, I peeled the concrete roof back half of the 18 feet, so 9 feet of it's covered. I didn't want it to be totally covered.
Right.
I wanted to have more light and things in there. So that's another feature that I think is part of the DNA of this house is that roof garden.
And I love it because it is a garden too. It's lush. It makes you feel good when you go out there. Very private space. And again, you get a different perspective on the property,
right.
which is amazing.
So, no, I think the house speaks for itself. And I think it's, my clients have taken amazing care of it, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud to continue to be part of its life.
Absolutely.
Because it's important to me.
I think it's important.
Very important.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a kudos to you, because
well,
that's what this property exudes,
right.
essentially. So,
thank you.
Guy, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Joel. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us for another segment of Talking Trends. We'll see you next time.